The October sun had just begun to wash the Baltimore skyline in muted gold, the light catching on the glass of high-rises near the inner harbor and spilling across the rows of old brick houses that lined West Baltimore's streets. Naomi Carter stood in her small apartment, her hand steady as she clipped her father's tarnished police badge to the inside of her coat, a private ritual she'd repeated before every operation. The badge wasn't for show. No one but her would see it. But its weight reminded her of why she was here, why she risked everything. Her father had died wearing that badge. An African-American officer in a precinct that, back in the 80s, barely tolerated his presence. He'd been killed responding to a domestic disturbance when Naomi was just 11. She still remembered the folded flag handed to her mother at the funeral, the whispered comments from some officers about how he should have waited for backup. She had grown up knowing the difference between a uniform that protected people and one that protected itself. Now, as a seasoned agent with the National Security Intelligence Division, she carried both his legacy and her own mission. Under the name Naomi Lewis, she had spent the last 3 months undercover at the West Baltimore Community Resource Center, gathering intel on Calvin Drake, a charismatic local businessman with a clean public image and a very dirty sideline, moving military-grade weapons to domestic extremist groups. An encrypted message on her secure phone at 5:30 a.m. had set today's course. Asset confirms movement tonight. Meet at location 3,400 hours. After weeks of careful observation, the deal Drake had been preparing was finally in motion. If NSID intel was correct, this shipment would be the largest cache of illegal firearms intercepted in the region's history. Naomi moved through her morning with calculated precision. She double-checked her concealed recording devices, a pen clipped to her tote bag, a necklace with a hidden mic in its pendant, and the phone that, while it looked like an ordinary Android, could transmit an emergency signal bypassing all local networks. Every item had been tested twice before leaving her apartment. She paused at the window, taking in the quiet block of row houses. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of coffee and baked goods from the corner cafe. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, was sweeping her stoop. Naomi stepped outside, locking the door with a practiced twist, and waved. "Morning, Mrs. Whitaker." "Morning, Naomi," the older woman called back, leaning on her broom. "You heading to the center already?" "Got a meeting before I open up. You take care now." Mrs. Whitaker nodded, her eyes warm. "Always do." Naomi headed for her car, a modest gray sedan that blended in with the neighborhood. She carried herself like any other community worker heading to her job, shoulders relaxed, pace steady. But inside, her mind was already running through the day's operational checklist. Halfway to the car, she felt it, that subtle prickle at the back of her neck, the one her training had taught her never to ignore. She glanced across the street. A man in a gray hoodie was leaning against a lamppost, his gaze flicking toward her before he turned away. She caught the glint of a phone in his hand, his lips moving as he spoke into it. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Naomi didn't break stride. She unlocked the car, slid in, and started the engine, her eyes sweeping the mirrors. The man stayed where he was, still talking. As she pulled away from the curb, she watched him in the rear view. A moment later, he stepped into a recessed doorway out of sight. Her route took her through the heart of West Baltimore. The neighborhood shifted from tidy residential streets to busier avenues with corner liquor stores, murals of local legends, and clusters of young men talking on stoops. She stopped at a light on West Pratt Street, catching a glimpse far in the distance of cranes rising above the Seagirt Marine Terminal. The sight pulled at her attention for a moment. Tonight, those docks could be the stage for either a career-defining bust or a disaster. She turned onto Carey Street, the morning sun glinting off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. A bus rumbled past, its windows fogged with passengers' breath. Naomi checked her mirrors again, habit as much as caution. That was when she noticed it, a black and white Baltimore police cruiser pulling into her lane 2 cars back. She reminded herself not to jump to conclusions. Baltimore PD patrols were common in this area, but when she made the next turn and the cruiser followed, she noted it. 3 blocks later, it was still behind her. Naomi adjusted her grip on the wheel, keeping both hands visible at 10 and 2, her speed steady. She thought of the meeting with her handler later that morning, the evidence she'd gathered over weeks, and how fragile undercover work could be. A single unnecessary encounter with local law enforcement could put months of preparation at risk. The light ahead turned red. She eased to a stop, counted a full 3 seconds, just as she always did, and then rolled forward when it turned green. In her mirror, the cruiser closed the gap, its lights flashing once before the siren gave a short chirp. So much for avoiding attention. Naomi signaled, pulling smoothly to the curb. She exhaled slowly, schooling her expression into calm. The badge inside her coat felt heavier than usual, pressing against her ribs like a silent reminder. Don't give them a reason. The driver's door of the cruiser opened, and a tall, broad-shouldered officer stepped out. His uniform was crisp, his sunglasses reflective enough to block any read on his eyes. Even from a distance, Naomi could read his posture, confident to the point of arrogance. A second officer, leaner and younger, exited the passenger side, hanging back slightly. Naomi lowered her window, resting both hands on the steering wheel. "Morning, officer," she said evenly. "License and registration," the tall one said, his voice carrying an edge that suggested it wasn't a request. The name tag read Cole. "May I ask the reason for the stop?" Naomi kept her tone polite but firm. "You rolled through that stop sign back there," Cole replied without hesitation. Naomi knew she hadn't. She'd stopped so deliberately that a driver behind her had tapped their horn, but she also knew arguing now would only escalate the encounter. "I believe I came to a complete stop, officer," she said, reaching slowly toward her glove compartment. "But here's my information." She handed over her Maryland driver's license and the vehicle registration, both under her cover name, Naomi Lewis. Cole took them without another word, walking back to the cruiser. The second officer, Price, stepped closer to her window, his eyes scanning the interior of her car. "Where are you headed this morning?" Price asked. "To work. Community center on West Fayette." "True enough." Price nodded but didn't smile. He moved back toward the cruiser, leaning in to speak to Cole. Naomi couldn't hear their words over the idle hum of her engine, but she caught the quick glance Cole shot her way. A moment later he was walking back, his posture a shade more aggressive. "Step out of the vehicle, Ms. Lewis," Cole said. Naomi's mind sharpened. This was no casual stop. She glanced in her side mirror. The man in the gray hoodie from earlier was nowhere in sight. She opened her door slowly, her movements deliberate. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "Some irregularities with your information," Cole said. "We're going to need to take a closer look." The late-morning traffic hummed by as Naomi stepped onto the sidewalk, the city's familiar rhythm carrying on around her. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn echoed from the harbor, a sound that made her think again of the cranes she'd seen earlier. Tonight, the docks would be waiting, but right now, so were the officers, and their eyes weren't on the harbor. Cole stepped closer until he was well inside Naomi's personal space, the faint smell of aftershave and stale coffee mixing in the cold morning air. "Hands where I can see them," he said. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried that brittle authority Naomi had heard from officers who liked the power of the badge more than the duty. Naomi complied, keeping her eyes steady on his face. "Officer, I'm happy to answer your questions, but—" "Turn around and place your hands on the hood," Cole interrupted. Price moved to the passenger side of her car, peering through the window as if searching for something specific. Naomi could feel the eyes of a few pedestrians on her now. A woman in a puffy jacket slowed as she passed, glancing between Naomi and the officers before shaking her head and moving on. Cole's voice cut through her thoughts. "We've had reports of drug activity in this area. Your behavior fits the pattern." Naomi almost laughed. She'd been driving under the speed limit with her hands at 10 and 2 for 3 blocks, but she knew better than to challenge him outright. Not here, not now. "I don't consent to a search," she said evenly. "That so?" Cole's jaw tightened. "We'll see about that." From the corner of her eye, Naomi saw Price pause at the front passenger seat. "What's this?" he called, reaching in. Naomi's gut tightened. She'd been meticulous about keeping her cover gear hidden. Whatever he was about to hold up, it wasn't something she'd left in plain view. "Looks like evidence in plain sight," Price announced, his voice pitched just loud enough for Cole to hear. Cole's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Well, that changes things, doesn't it?" Before Naomi could speak, Cole had pulled a pair of plastic cuffs from his belt. "Hands behind your back." The sharp bite of the cuffs dug into her wrists as she complied. She kept her breathing slow, her face neutral, even as she felt the familiar press of her secure phone in her jacket pocket. With the shift of her wrists, she triggered the recessed button, just enough to send a silent beacon to NSID. Cole leaned in close as he finished cinching the cuffs. "You people always think you're above the law." The words were soft, but the tone was meant to cut. Naomi didn't respond. Every word, every tone of voice was being recorded by the hidden mic in her necklace. Price closed her car door with a careless shove and joined them. "What do you want to do with the vehicle?" "Impound it," Cole said. "We'll do a thorough search back at the station." Naomi allowed herself one slow breath. Being taken in gave her a narrow window of control. NSID would see her location ping shift from the traffic stop to the Western District Station. It also meant Drake's people might notice her absence from the community center. And if they did, tonight's operation could implode before it even began. As Cole guided her toward the cruiser, Naomi kept her posture upright. Across the street, a city bus pulled to a stop, its passengers turning their heads toward the scene. To them, she was just another black woman in handcuffs on a Baltimore sidewalk. She caught the faint rumble of a container truck somewhere in the distance, maybe heading toward the docks, a sound most people wouldn't even register, but to her, it was a reminder of the clock ticking down toward the shipment she was here to intercept. The cuffs cut into her wrists again as Cole nudged her toward the open back door of the cruiser. "Watch your head," he said, without any real concern. Naomi slid inside, the smell of vinyl and lingering sweat filling the small space. The door shut with a heavy finality, the kind that said, "You're not leaving until we say so." Through the metal mesh and plexiglass partition, she could see Cole settle into the driver's seat, Price beside him. Cole's hand rested on the gear shift, but his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, meeting hers for a fraction of a second. Naomi looked right back, unflinching. The engine rumbled, and the cruiser pulled away from the curb. Somewhere behind them, her gray sedan sat alone, waiting to be towed. Somewhere ahead, at the Western District Station, the real test of her cover and her mission was about to begin. And in the shadows of the Seagirt Marine Terminal, a weapons deal was already moving closer. The ride to the Western District Station felt longer than it was. Naomi sat in the back of the cruiser, her wrists still cuffed, the hard plastic seat digging into her shoulders every time Cole took a corner. Through the wire mesh, she could see the outline of Price's face as he spoke to Cole in low tones. She couldn't catch every word, but she heard enough, snippets about keeping it clean and locking it down. Her secure phone, still pressed against her hip under the jacket, had long since sent its silent alert. NSID knew she'd been detained. The question was whether they'd move quickly enough to keep her cover from shattering. They pulled into the station lot, the brick facade of the Western District looming ahead. The building was squat, utilitarian, functional, not welcoming. Cole parked, got out, and opened her door without a word. His hand on her arm was firm, almost proprietary, as he guided her toward the entrance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale, almost greenish hue across the beige walls. A few officers glanced up as the trio walked in, some curious, others indifferent. Naomi kept her expression neutral, her eyes scanning the space. 2 exits she could see, a hallway to the left that led to the holding cells, and a closed door marked Lieutenant. At the intake desk, Cole addressed the desk sergeant, a heavy-set man with a receding hairline and the kind of deep frown that looked permanent. "Got one for you, Sarge," Cole said. "Rolled a stop sign, concealed weapon in the car, possible false ID." Naomi didn't react, though the last charge was a fabrication. The sergeant barely looked at her before pushing a clipboard toward Cole. "Fill it out." Price began unloading her belongings from a clear evidence bag, wallet, keys, tote bag. He handled them with the same casual disrespect she'd seen too many times from officers who thought property and trash were interchangeable. "Careful with that," she said evenly as he tossed her tote to the counter. Price's mouth twitched, but he didn't respond. Cole, still filling out the form, glanced up at her. "Where exactly did you say you were headed?" "I didn't," Naomi replied. "But I work at the community center on West Fayette." He smirked. "Lot of interesting company there." Before she could answer, the door to the lieutenant's office opened. A tall, well-built black man in his late 40s stepped out, his uniform neat but worn in a way that suggested he'd earned every stripe. His nameplate read Ellison. His eyes swept the scene, lingering on Naomi for a beat longer than on anyone else. "What's the probable cause on this one?" Ellison asked, directing the question to Cole. "Rolled a stop sign," Cole said, standing straighter. "Then we spotted a concealed weapon in plain view." Ellison's gaze shifted to Naomi. "Is that true?" "No, sir," she said calmly. "I came to a complete stop, and my weapon is legally registered." Cole's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Ellison turned back to him. "Body cam footage should make that easy to confirm. Pull it up after you finish processing." The comment hung in the air like a quiet challenge. Cole didn't respond, just handed the clipboard back to the sergeant. Naomi was led toward the holding area. The hallway narrowed, the sound of footsteps echoing off cinder block walls. The metallic click of a cell door opening ahead was followed by the dull thud of it closing behind her once she was inside. The room was bare. Bench, toilet, nothing else. She sat, breathing evenly, calculating. If she kept her cover, she had maybe 2 hours before her handler expected her at their meeting. That meant NSID's first step would be to send someone local, likely under a cover story, to confirm her status. Until then, she had to endure Cole's game without revealing who she really was. Minutes later, the cell door opened again. Price stepped in with another woman in custody, mid-20s, wearing a business skirt and blouse. She looked more annoyed than afraid. "This is Tanya," Price said flatly, ushering her inside. "Make yourselves comfortable." Tanya sat beside Naomi. "They said I had a busted taillight," she said, rolling her eyes. "Then claimed they smelled marijuana. I was on my way home from a job interview." Naomi kept her voice level. "Does this happen a lot?" Tanya snorted. "With Cole and Price all the time. Everybody in West Baltimore knows to steer clear when they're on patrol." Naomi stored the information away. It wasn't new to her, but it was confirmation from someone living it every day. 15 minutes later, the door opened again. This time it was Cole. He didn't step inside, just stood in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the light. "You know," he said, his tone conversational but laced with something sharper, "most folks in your position would be thinking about how to make this go easier." Naomi met his gaze. "By confessing to something I didn't do?" His smile was thin. "By understanding how the system works." He let the words hang there before closing the door and walking away. Naomi exchanged a glance with Tanya, who shook her head. "That man's a snake." In the main room, Ellison was reviewing the arrest report, his brow furrowed. He keyed the radio on his shoulder. "Cole, Price, my office." The summons carried weight, and both officers moved toward the lieutenant's door. Naomi, watching through the small window in the cell, caught the brief look Cole shot her as he passed. It wasn't anger. It was something colder. Calculation. Ellison's office door closed, and the low rumble of voices seeped through the cinder block walls. Naomi couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakable. Measured authority from Ellison, defensive interruptions from Cole. A female officer approached the cell. "You get one call," she said, unlocking the door. Naomi rose, keeping her movements calm. "Thank you." She was led to a desk phone near the booking counter. The handset was grimy, the cord tangled. She dialed a number from memory, a residential line that, to anyone else, belonged to her sister. In reality, it was an NSID emergency contact routed through a secure server. When the line clicked, she spoke lightly. "Hey, Sarah, I'm going to be late for dinner tonight. Got held up at the Western District Station." There was a pause. A computer-generated female voice on the other end responded with a canned greeting about weather in D.C. Naomi continued, "No, nothing serious. Just a mix-up with my car registration. Could take a few hours, though." The phrasing was precise. Her location, her status, non-life-threatening, and the time frame for extraction, all hidden in casual language. She finished the call with, "Give Mom my love," which confirmed she was maintaining cover. The officer returned her to the cell, locking it behind her. Tanya raised an eyebrow. "That your sister?" "Yeah," Naomi said with a small smile. "She worries if I'm late." Minutes ticked by, the muted sounds of the precinct filling the air, the clack of a keyboard, the murmur of conversation, the distant ring of a phone. The cell door opened again, and this time it was Ellison himself. "Ms. Lewis, I'd like to ask you a few more questions," he said, his voice neutral. Naomi followed him to an interrogation room. The walls were the same beige as the lobby, the table metal and bolted to the floor. A camera sat in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. Cole and Price were already inside. Cole leaned casually against the wall. Price stood near the table, arms crossed. Ellison gestured for Naomi to sit. "You said your weapon is legally registered?" "Yes, Lieutenant. You can check the state database under my name." Cole scoffed. "Paperwork can be faked." Ellison's gaze shifted to him. "So can traffic violations." The words landed with quiet precision. Price glanced between them but stayed silent. Ellison opened a folder, scanning a sheet. "According to your report, Officer Cole, the stop sign violation was your reason for the stop, but the dash cam shows her vehicle coming to a full stop." Cole's jaw clenched. "Camera angle doesn't show everything." Ellison ignored the comment. "Ms. Lewis, where exactly do you work again?" "West Baltimore Community Resource Center. I run youth programs." Ellison studied her for a moment, then closed the folder. "All right, that's all for now." As Naomi was escorted back toward the holding area, she caught Cole watching her with a narrowed gaze. There was no anger in his eyes, only calculation. She stepped into the cell, and the door shut behind her. Somewhere across Baltimore, Calvin Drake's crew was preparing for tonight's weapons shipment, and here she was, burning daylight behind a locked door. In Ellison's office, the lieutenant picked up the phone. His next call wasn't to Cole's supervisor, it was to a federal verification line. "Yeah, I've got a name and an authentication code I need checked," he said, glancing toward the window that overlooked the holding area. Down the hall, Cole leaned toward Price, speaking low. "If she's who I think she is, this whole thing blows up in our faces." Price frowned. "Then what?" Cole's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Then we make sure no one believes her." Lieutenant Ellison sat at his desk, the receiver tucked against his ear, his other hand jotting notes in precise block letters. "Yes," he said into the phone. "Authentication code, Blue Jay 739er. Name, Naomi Lewis." A pause. The voice on the other end was clipped, official, and low enough that no one in the room could overhear the details. Ellison's eyes shifted briefly toward the frosted glass panel in his door, where the blurred shapes of Cole and Price lingered outside. "Understood," Ellison said finally. "Send that to my secure email. I'll handle it from here." He hung up, his jaw tightening. If the code checked out, it meant the woman in his holding cell wasn't just a random traffic stop. And if she wasn't, Cole and Price had just stepped into something that could burn the department down. Outside his office, Cole leaned against the wall, arms folded, talking low to Price. "You ever hear of a community worker with encrypted phones and a weapon hidden under the seat?" Price shrugged. "She's not telling us everything, sure, but—" Cole cut him off. "But nothing. You know what happens if she makes a complaint? IA comes sniffing around. I'm not losing my badge over some mouthy do-gooder who thinks she's smarter than me." From the far end of the hall, the station door swung open. A man in a tailored dark suit walked in, his polished shoes clicking on the tile. His ID wallet flipped open before he even reached the desk. "Special Agent Brooks, FBI," he said smoothly. "I'm here regarding a person of interest you brought in this morning. Name's Naomi Lewis." The desk sergeant blinked, then gestured toward Ellison's office. "Lieutenant's handling that one. You can wait here. I'll let him know." Brooks's gaze slid casually across the room, but in reality, he was taking stock. Number of officers, camera positions, possible exits. His eyes landed on Cole and Price for the briefest moment, just long enough to register the flicker of recognition in Cole's expression. Cole looked away too quickly. Ellison emerged from his office. "Agent Brooks, is it? I understand you have an interest in Ms. Lewis." Brooks returned the ID to his pocket. "She popped on a flag for an ongoing federal investigation. Identity theft network operating across state lines. Might connect to a bigger case." It was a cover story, and a good one. Simple enough to justify his presence, vague enough to avoid giving away Naomi's real role. Ellison glanced at Cole. "Bring Ms. Lewis to interrogation 2. The walk from the cell block to the interrogation room was short, but Naomi used every step to read the room. The man waiting inside, Brooks, met her eyes with the barest nod, an old field habit they'd both learned years ago. She gave nothing in return, her face unreadable. Cole closed the door behind them. He leaned in the corner, arms crossed, watching like a hawk. Price stood by the wall, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Lewis," Brooks began, "we've been looking into some activity around the community center. You've been there about 3 months?" "That's right," Naomi said. "I run youth programs, after-school tutoring." Cole smirked. "And carry a concealed weapon to work?" Naomi didn't take her eyes off Brooks. "Baltimore isn't exactly Mayberry, officer." Ellison took a seat, folding his hands on the table. "We're going to check your weapon registration. If it comes back clean, there's no reason to hold you." Cole's mouth opened, but Ellison's raised eyebrow cut him off. Brooks shifted slightly, angling his body so that only Naomi could see the way his thumb brushed his belt. 3 quick taps, the prearranged signal for NSID knows, "Stay in cover." Naomi felt her shoulders loosen a fraction. "Lieutenant, I'd appreciate it if this could be handled quickly. I have a lot of people counting on me today." Ellison nodded. "I'll expedite it." But before he could stand, the desk phone on the wall buzzed. He picked it up, listened for a few seconds, then frowned. "Send it through." He hung up and turned to Naomi. "The registration checks out. No violations." For a moment, the air in the room shifted. Cole's shoulders tightened. Price's eyes darted to the floor. Ellison stood. "Ms. Lewis, you're free to go. I'll have your property returned." Cole's jaw worked silently. "Lieutenant, I think—" "That'll be all, officer," Ellison said, his voice like granite. Brooks followed Naomi out, both of them silent until they were in the hallway. "You all right?" he asked under his breath. "For now," she murmured. "But Cole's not done. He knows something's off." Ellison caught up to them, handing Naomi her tote bag and keys. "I don't know what game's being played here, Ms. Lewis, but I know a bad stop when I see one. Stay clear of those 2. She met his gaze. "I wish I could." Ellison's brows drew together, but before he could ask, Cole's voice echoed from the far end of the hall, low, but caring just enough for them to hear. "I've got a call to make," he told Price. "Someone's going to want to know she's walking out of here." Naomi and Brooks exchanged a quick look. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to tighten the clock on their operation. Outside, the crisp Baltimore air felt sharper than it had that morning. Naomi's wrists still bore faint red marks from the cuffs, a reminder of just how fast things could turn. "Your meeting with the handlers still on?" Brooks asked as they walked toward a dark sedan parked across the street. "It has to be," Naomi said. "But if Cole's making that call, Drake might already be adjusting his timeline." Brooks opened the passenger door for her. "Then we'd better move." From the precinct doorway, Cole watched them drive away, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah," he said into the receiver, his voice low. "She's out, and you were right. She's not who she says she is." "Shut up." Ellison stood just inside the station's side entrance, watching Naomi and Brooks cross the street toward a dark NSID sedan. He'd been in the job long enough to recognize the way Brooks carried himself. Not just an FBI man, but someone used to operating in tighter circles. When the sedan turned the corner and disappeared, Ellison went back to his office. Cole was leaning against the wall outside, his phone still warm in his hand. He straightened when Ellison approached. "You got something to say, Lieutenant?" Cole asked. "Yeah," Ellison said evenly. "Stay out of my investigations unless I ask for your help." Cole's smirk was almost a challenge. "Sure thing, sir." Ellison didn't bother responding. He stepped inside, closed the door, and sat behind his desk. His computer screen still showed the verification request he'd sent earlier, the cursor blinking like a quiet metronome. A secure reply had arrived minutes ago. "NSID identification confirmed. Agent Naomi Washington, active undercover assignment." The confirmation tightened something in Ellison's chest. He wasn't surprised. Her composure in that interrogation room had told him she was more than she claimed. But the official stamp of truth made the stakes heavier. 2 of his own officers had just unlawfully detained a federal agent. Across town, Naomi sat in the passenger seat of the NSID sedan, Brooks driving with one hand on the wheel, the other on a secure phone. "Director's got the update," Brooks said. "They want you to decide. Do we blow your cover entirely, or keep playing it close?" Naomi looked out the window, the city blurring past. "If I blow it now, Drake shuts down. We lose the shipment. We lose him." "Then we play it close," Brooks said. "But Ellison's not the enemy here. You going to bring him in?" "Partially," Naomi replied. "Enough so he doesn't get in the way. Not enough to make him a target." They pulled into a quiet side street 2 blocks from the station. Naomi got out, straightened her coat, and walked back toward the front entrance alone. Brooks stayed in the car, ready to run interference if needed. Ellison met her just inside the lobby. "Ms. Lewis, Naomi, I need you to come with me." She followed him to his office, closing the door behind them. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. "Lieutenant," she said finally, "I'm going to tell you something in confidence. My name is Naomi Washington. I'm a federal agent working undercover." Ellison didn't react immediately. "You have proof?" "In my vehicle," Naomi said. "Hidden compartment under the driver's side floor mat. Different from where your officers found the weapon. Inside is my NSID ID and an authentication code, Blue Jay 739er. Ellison studied her face. "That's a serious claim. Why tell me?" "Because innocent lives are at stake," Naomi said. "I've been tracking a weapons trafficking operation moving military-grade firearms to domestic extremists. The exchange is happening tonight. If I'm not released and back in position, that operation proceeds unchallenged, and people will die." Ellison let the weight of her words settle before he nodded once. "All right, let's check your story." They walked to the evidence lockup where her car keys had been stored. Outside in the impound lot, Ellison followed her instructions exactly. The hidden compartment clicked open under his hand, revealing a black leather case stamped with the NSID seal. Inside, credentials, federal ID, and a small card with the code she'd given him. He called the verification line. This time, Naomi could hear the faint murmur of the operator's confirmation. "It's real," Ellison said quietly, ending the call. "You're actually an undercover federal agent." Naomi nodded. Which means Cole and Price just interfered with a national security investigation. Ellison closed the compartment and straightened. Let's get back inside before anyone starts asking questions. Neither of them saw Cole at the far end of the lot, leaning against his cruiser, phone pressed to his ear. Yeah, he was saying into the receiver. She's legit. And she's been looking at you, Drake. You need to move your timetable. Back inside, Ellison led Naomi to his office again. Brooks was waiting there now, his cover still intact for anyone passing by. She's confirmed, Ellison told him. Federal agent, active assignment, and Cole's bad news. We know, Brooks said. We think he just tipped your suspect. The deal's going to happen earlier. How much earlier? Naomi asked. Brooks glanced at his phone as a secure message came through. 1,700 hours, that's less than 3 hours from now. Ellison's eyes narrowed. That's at Sigurd, isn't it? Naomi nodded. Warehouse 6. If we move fast, we can still get ahead of it. Ellison didn't hesitate. I can put 8 of my best on this, but we do it my way. Clean, by the book. I'm not giving Cole or anyone else an opening to screw this up. Brooks smiled faintly. Sounds like we're in agreement. Naomi leaned forward over Ellison's desk. We'll need to coordinate with NSID's tactical team. If Drake's expecting trouble, he'll have security doubled. And now, Brooks added, he knows you're involved, which means he'll be looking for you specifically. Naomi straightened, her jaw set. Then we give him something else to look at. Ellison cleared a space on his desk, pulling a laminated map of the Sigurd Marine Terminal from a file drawer. The map was well worn, marked with grease pencil notes from past police operations. Naomi pointed to the eastern perimeter. Warehouse 6 is here. 2 main entrances, 1 loading dock on the south side. Drake's likely to have armed men at each. Brooks leaned in. We've also got snipers on rooftops per drone feed from this morning. He's expecting trouble. Ellison tapped the north side of the map. There's a drainage access here. Most folks don't know it connects to the lower service corridor of Warehouse 6. Naomi looked up sharply. Can it handle 2 or 3 operators moving through without detection? Quietly, yes, Ellison said. But the grate is welded in place. We'd need tools. I'll put it in the plan, Brooks said, already texting the NSID team lead. We'll hit from 3 angles, front, loading dock, and drainage. Naomi, you lead the infiltration through the service corridor. Ellison, your people cover the dock. My team takes the front. Naomi's phone buzzed. A secure text from HQ. Bell has doubled security. Proceed with caution. She looked at Brooks and Ellison. He's nervous. That means we still have a shot to catch him before he moves the shipment. Ellison folded the map and slid it into a plain manila folder. Then let's get moving. They stepped out of the office together. Across the station, Cole watched them go, his phone still in his hand, his expression unreadable. Outside, the late afternoon light was already fading. The sky over Baltimore streaked with the first hints of orange and purple. The convoy of unmarked vehicles was waiting, NSID SUVs and 2 OCPD tactical vans. Naomi pulled on her tactical vest, feeling the snug weight settle across her shoulders. Brooks checked his sidearm. Ellison gave a short nod to his officers. Let's move. Engines rumbled to life. One by one, the vehicles rolled out of the station lot, heading toward the docks, toward the deal that had just been moved up, toward whatever Drake had waiting for them. And as the convoy disappeared into the growing twilight, Cole slid into his cruiser, turned the key, and drove in the opposite direction. Ellison cleared a space on his desk, pulling a laminated map of the Sigurd Marine Terminal from a file drawer. The map was well worn, marked with grease pencil notes from past police operations. Naomi pointed to the eastern perimeter. Warehouse 6 is here. 2 main entrances, 1 loading dock on the south side. Drake's likely to have armed men at each. Brooks leaned in. We've also got snipers on rooftops per drone feed from this morning. He's expecting trouble. Ellison tapped the north side of the map. There's a drainage access here. Most folks don't know it connects to the lower service corridor of Warehouse 6. Naomi looked up sharply. Can it handle 2 or 3 operators moving through without detection? Quietly, yes, Ellison said. But the grate is welded in place. We'd need tools. "I'll put it in the plan," Brooks said, already texting the NSID team lead. "We'll hit from 3 angles: front, loading dock, and drainage. Naomi, you lead the infiltration through the service corridor. Ellison, your people cover the dock. My team takes the front." Naomi's phone buzzed. A secure text from HQ. "Bell has doubled security. Proceed with caution." She looked at Brooks and Ellison. "He's nervous. That means we still have a shot to catch him before he moves the shipment." Ellison folded the map and slid it into a plain manila folder. "Then let's get moving." They stepped out of the office together. Across the station, Cole watched them go, his phone still in his hand, his expression unreadable. Outside, the late afternoon light was already fading, the sky over Baltimore streaked with the first hints of orange and purple. The convoy of unmarked vehicles was waiting, NSID SUVs and 2 OCPD tactical vans. Naomi pulled on her tactical vest, feeling the snug weight settle across her shoulders. Brooks checked his sidearm. Ellison gave a short nod to his officers. "Let's move." Engines rumbled to life. One by one, the vehicles rolled out of the station lot, heading toward the docks, toward the deal that had just been moved up, toward whatever Drake had waiting for them. And as the convoy disappeared into the growing twilight, Cole slid into his cruiser, turned the key, and drove in the opposite direction. The blast still rang in Naomi's ears as smoke rolled across the warehouse floor. Silhouettes emerged, 8 men in dark tactical gear, their faces hidden behind black balaclavas. They moved like soldiers, weapons high, formations tight. Naomi flattened herself behind a stack of crates, training her rifle on the new arrivals. Through the haze, she caught Mercer's expression, a flicker of surprise, quickly masked by calculation. "Not ours," he barked to the nearest of Drake's men. "Hold fire until we know." The masked squad didn't hesitate. Their lead man dropped 2 of Drake's guards with precise double taps, then pivoted toward the NSID front team's position. Bullets sparked off steel beams overhead, the sharp rattle of automatic fire echoing like a drumline. "Identify!" Brooks shouted over comms. No answer, just more gunfire. Naomi ducked low, switching channels. "Ellison, status." "Dock team still engaged," he replied, voice strained. "We've got hostiles from 2 directions now. I think your new friends came in by water." The masked squad fanned out, forcing Drake's crew toward the center of the warehouse. Drake himself emerged from a side office, a pistol in one hand, a radio in the other. He barked into it. "Move the rest now. North Pier, 5 minutes." Naomi's gut clenched. They were trying to move the weapons out under the chaos. She broke cover, sprinting toward the crate stack closest to Drake. A masked gunman swung toward her, but she dropped him with a quick burst. Drake saw her then, his eyes narrowing in recognition. "Agent Washington," he called, voice mocking even in the din. "You really don't quit." "Put it down, Drake!" she shouted back. Instead, he fired, wild, a covering shot as he moved toward the rear exit. Naomi gave chase, weaving through the chaos. In her ear, Ellison's voice cut in. "Washington, Cole's here." She froze mid-stride. "Repeat?" "North Pier. He's talking to 2 of Drake's men." The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was fact. Naomi pushed harder, breaking through the rear loading bay just in time to see Drake heading for a black van idling by the water's edge. Cole stood beside it, one hand out as if to usher him in. "Cole!" she shouted, weapon trained on him. He turned slowly, that same smug half-smile on his face. "You could have walked away from this, Washington, but you had to make it personal." Ellison's voice roared over comms. "Drop it, Cole!" But Cole moved first, grabbing Drake's arm and shoving him toward the van. Naomi fired, a controlled pair that punched into the pavement inches from Cole's boots. "Don't test me," she warned. The distraction was enough. Brooks appeared from the shadows of a container stack, flanking from the left. His shot took the driver of the van through the shoulder, sending him sprawling. The engine revved once, then died. Cole spun toward Brooks, weapon rising, but Ellison's shot cracked from the dockside, knocking the pistol from Cole's grip. He staggered back, clutching his hand. Drake, seeing his exit gone, tried for the water. Naomi tackled him hard onto the pier, both of them sliding dangerously close to the edge before she wrenched the pistol from his grasp and cuffed him. "Marcus Drake," she said, breathless. "You're done." Around them, the firefight inside the warehouse tapered off. The masked squad was gone, vanished into the smoke and shadows, leaving only bodies behind. Brooks jogged up, securing Drake while Ellison's team closed in on Cole. "Officer Jason Cole," Ellison said flatly, "you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and aiding a known felon." Cole's smile was gone now, replaced by a cold glare. "You think you've won? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Naomi stood, pulling Drake to his feet. "Funny, he said the same thing. The weapons were secured within the hour, 53 AR-15 rifles, thousands of rounds, tactical mods, all tagged and loaded into evidence trucks. Cole was taken in separate transport, silent but seething." On the dock, Naomi and Ellison stood apart from the bustle. "You saved my city tonight," Ellison said quietly. "Even if some of my own tried to burn it down." Naomi shook her head. "We saved it. But Drake's right. This isn't over. Whoever those masked men were, they weren't here for us. They were here to clean up loose ends." Brooks joined them, holding up a tablet. We pulled partial comm intercepts from Drake's radio, calls to an encrypted network we've never seen before. This goes higher. Naomi looked at the black water lapping against the pier. "Then we keep going higher until there's nowhere left for them to hide." And the night at the docks had ended in sirens and steel. But in the quiet days that followed, what lingered wasn't the noise. It was the stillness afterward. Those who had been there could remember the cold bite of the harbor wind, the weight of choices made in seconds, and the knowledge that truth had stepped out from an unexpected place. It was a reminder that sometimes the person we least expect is the one carrying the light. In a city where trust between law enforcement and the Black community had been worn thin by years of disappointment, this case unfolded like a rare and necessary crack in the wall. It began with suspicion, with uniforms and badges standing in the way of understanding, and it ended with an unlikely coalition: federal agents, a local lieutenant, and residents who had every reason to doubt, working side by side. The Black community watched, not with blind faith, but with cautious hope that maybe this time the system would listen. The heart of it was simple, but not easy. Hold on to your dignity, and when the moment comes, stand up for the truth you know, even if your voice shakes. That's how Agent Washington, quietly, deliberately, turned a wrongful stop into the unraveling of a network that reached far beyond one city's borders. She didn't just reclaim her own rights. She opened a door for others, proving that a calm, principled stand can be stronger than rage alone. Like the way an old streetlight glows at dusk, steady against the wind, a single act of integrity can light the path for those who've walked too long in shadow. For the Black community, the lesson was as personal as it was public. Every small victory against prejudice is also a stone laid in the foundation of something better. And for those outside that experience, it was a call to look twice before deciding who someone is or what they're worth. Preconceived notions are a poor compass. They'll steer you wrong every time. The truth, as this story showed, can wear many faces, and some of them belong to people we've been taught to underestimate. Maybe that's why the image that stays isn't the clash in the warehouse, but the quiet handshake afterward, between a woman who'd been wronged and a man willing to admit his colleagues were wrong. In that moment, justice wasn't a verdict or an arrest. It was the choice to see each other clearly without the fog of uniform or stereotype. Take a little time to think about where you've seen moments like that in your own life. If this story touched your heart, let its warmth travel further. Tell it to someone who might need reminding that help, courage, and truth can come from the most unexpected places. After all, the measure of a community isn't how it treats the powerful, but how it stands beside those who have been pushed to the margins, waiting for someone to believe them.